maybe just to kick things off, what do you guys think is the most important characteristics of Bitcoin that make it a superpower? What's number one for you guys?
I think it's interesting. The white paper talks a lot about it being peer-to-peer digital cash. It really talks about that medium of exchange, which is definitely a use case and definitely something that's needed. But I think actually the bigger use case is what we're seeing currently, which is store of value. Um, the knock-on effects of having some of a way to be able to save your purchasing power into the future. The knock-on effects is, it goes into everything. It goes into the unaffordability of living. It goes into gambling in the casino of the markets. It transcends so many different aspects of the world, and there's so much, like, we're very financially privileged being here in North America, whereas in the other nations around the world, they either don't have their own stock market, or they're not able to invest in other stock markets. Their own stock market probably has all sorts of different issues too, depending on where we're talking about here, but they have no good store of value, and then they're always fighting against their local and global inflation, which just forces them to work even harder and acquire less goods and services for it. So store of value is a way bigger problem than people realize, and that's where we're at with Bitcoin. And I think we're going to talk about that later on, of when does this become a medium of exchange, or how important is a medium of exchange. But personally, I think store of value, I think there's a cycle of money becoming developed, and store of value is really important to establish. And it's also a really massive problem that Bitcoin is solving. And Bitcoin's superpower is that it's the best store of value, I would say.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that store of value phase is really important for us to actually get to a medium of exchange phase at some point. And I think it's important to remember that these are phases. It's going to take time. For example, I think with gold, people didn't really transact with it for a couple thousand years, I think it was. They didn't start transacting with it immediately. Over time, people understood what it was. They understood the value. They understood that it was scarce, and people were okay with accepting it in exchange for value in other ways. So food, for example, with Bitcoin, I think one of the issues that we have today, if you guys have been looking at my content, if the audience has been watching my content, I post a lot about how real estate is a massive problem, with people borrowing as much money as they can, bringing their future consumption to the present to buy as many houses as they can. That's a huge problem, because we're seeing that prices keep going up. The expenses to own a house, most people can't buy a house, and I think the majority of price increases for everything are starting from real estate, because there's more and more value being wasted on real estate. There's more and more energy being wasted on buying real estate and investing in real estate and analyzing real estate, when housing should just be a house. A house should just be a house, a place to live in. We shouldn't be thinking about what's the cash flow that you can earn from this property, or what the what the different ways are for you to financialize housing. And I think that's a massive problem. Can you just share my screen there, Jor? I saw this quick post before from somebody on Twitter. So you can see here, June Marie. I received my tax notice from the city of Edmonton. My property taxes are now $1,342 per month for a 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 2-bath bungalow. 1 year increase of $230 per month for seniors living near the river value, and I'm retired. This increase is criminal and needs looking into. So I don't know if this is it feels like a scam, right? These people spent their entire lives getting to finally be able to own a house, and now who knows if they paid it off. I'm not going to make an assumption here. If they did pay it off, though, and they're living on a fixed income, what if they can't afford to pay the property taxes on this house? And this is something that happens because of the fake money that we have. So Bitcoin, being the store of value, completely removes housing from being an asset, and we stop using when we stop using housing as an asset, it just changes everything. All these people who have spent their entire lives working, they can now actually make ends meet.
That's a crazy percentage increase. That's 17% in 1 year that property taxes have gone up. I mean, and that's completely out of their control. And that also lowers the value of that house, because now if they're trying to sell it, when somebody's buying something, they're going to price in how much the property taxes are and evaluate it based on all the costs associated with buying that property. That's really crazy. That's a really crazy post.
Yeah.
And that seems like a lot, but yesterday on the show, I was looking at the price of Bitcoin when I started streaming on 88 Sats radio, and it was $35,000 US. And so it's in a year and a half, it's gone up 3 times, which means that if you were storing your wealth in fiat dollars, US dollars, or Canadian, any sort of fiat currency, you lost 67% of your purchasing power in a year and a half. So like 17% increase seems like a lot, but in reality, and I think that this is where there's such a disconnect, is because most people are still plugged into the matrix. They still see that inflation's 2%, 3%, 5%. In reality, it is significantly higher than that. And it's housing, it's utilities, it's the grocery store, it's everywhere. Everything costs so much. And the real unlock there for people is just, instead of storing your time and energy in fiat, just store it in Bitcoin. Everything gets cheaper instead of more expensive. Like, it really isn't that hard. It's just such a big leap for people who are still plugged into that system to believe in something like Bitcoin. But when you show them that, it's like very objective. You lost 67% of your purchasing power just because you were holding dollars instead of Bitcoin. Nuts.
Absolutely. Jor, we haven't heard your what you think is the superpower of Bitcoin.
Oh yeah,
curious to hear that.
I didn't even think about it. I was too worried about what other people and you guys were thinking. I actually saw a comment here, and this is it is something that in Canada here, it's not a huge deal. In the US, it's probably not a huge deal, but it could be one day. And Russ here said the fact that you can cross borders without divulging your assets, this is especially irrelevant in corrupt countries with difficult custom procedures. Like, that to me, I think, is the biggest thing that a lot of people, it might not be the biggest superpower, but I think it's the most underappreciated aspect of Bitcoin, is that it is the asset that you can truly own. And I think that when you have an asset like that, it really changes the whole landscape of incentives. Because I think that if bad actors, criminals, once they get to the point of understanding Bitcoin and that it's valuable, they'll also get to the understanding in the sense that it is very hard to take somebody's Bitcoin from them if they've secured it properly. And so in that sense, I see a huge decline in violence over the years. This is on a micro scale for individuals. It's going to be bigger for countries. But like, when you have an asset like that you can cross borders with, that you can protect without worrying about somebody killing you and taking that, that's a pretty big deal. Because we've been absolutely obliterated by war, not so much here in the West, but like parts of the world have just been obliterated by war and violence for the last, I don't know, 100,000 years. Like, we've never had something like this before. And I think that having this now, and I was talking to a guy actually this morning, and he was talking about MicroStrategy and Bitcoin and how he planned on actually trading his strategy for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the asset. And he said that if he ever had to leave the country, he could do that with Bitcoin. That's what you want to have. You can't do that with MicroStrategy shares. You'd have a very hard time moving countries, finding a new place to live, and having access to those shares. That's a very underrated part of Bitcoin, from my perspective, anyways.
You can't do that with real estate either, right? If you have all of your assets denominated in real estate, where are you going to take it?
Yeah. And yeah, what you said there, George, is so interesting about how Bitcoin essentially raises the cost of violence, because there's not as much potential reward and it makes it more difficult. And if you look at the way nations engage in violence, oftentimes they'll engage with what they believe to be a lesser foe, because there's less cost to that violence and more ability to extract value out of going to war. It's why the Cold War was not, the Russia-American Cold War during the decade or the century of the 1900s wasn't a physical war, because there was too much cost of violence. It was too expensive because there was potential for nuclear war. They're very strong nations against each other. And then instead, the US goes on these like little skirmishes around the world where they can extract a bunch of natural resources and destroy a bunch and take property and all sorts of things, because there's less cost to that violence. So all of that extends down to the individual as well, where if you store your assets securely, there's less incentive for a violent actor to try to take that from you, because there's more cost to violence.
What do you think on that, Rajat? Oh, my laggy here.
Completely. I completely agree. I think before this, it wasn't possible. We had to use either physical goods or basically just trust. And it seems like fiat is almost the trust side of things instead of I mean, well, it is. It's the trust side of things where it's all just debt. With Bitcoin, we don't have to do that anymore. We can use something that's not physical, and it can also cross borders. It just changes everything. I mean, the entire system is completely changed. The financial system is completely being challenged right now.
100%. And that,
I was
sorry,
going to
go
say,
ahead,
I think unless everybody adopts Bitcoin, they're just going to become obsolete, right? Even banks, if they don't adopt Bitcoin, they're going to become obsolete.
Yeah.
I posted that.
They are adopting Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. And I posted that the other day. I said, I have more money than my credit union, because I do. They have fake illusionary money that actually has no value. Even if I had 5 sats, I'd have more than my credit union because they have 0.
Yeah.
Which is nuts.